You think you deserve that money? That trust fund belongs to Olivia now. She's better than you'll ever be. The words from my stepmother's phone call hit me like a slap. I gripped the edge of my hotel desk, trying to steady my racing heart. Denise's voice dripped with smug satisfaction as she delivered the news that she had drained the trust fund my mother had left me. My name is Samantha Hayes, and at 30, I thought I had finally freed myself from the toxic web of my family. I work in corporate real estate, a fast-paced career that has me constantly traveling. This was supposed to be just another Monday night in Chicago, preparing for a client meeting. Instead, I was listening to my stepmother gloat about stealing what was rightfully mine. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, keeping my voice controlled, betraying none of the fury rising inside me. I could almost picture Denise's face faltering on the other end of the line. She had expected tears, outrage, maybe even begging. What she hadn't expected was composure. "That's all you have to say?" Denise pressed, clearly irritated. "Olivia needs that money for her wedding and the new house. You would have wasted it on your pointless career anyway." I thought of my mother, who had passed away when I was 17. She had built a thriving design firm from scratch, ensuring my future was secure. That trust fund wasn't just money, it was her way of protecting me, making sure I had the means to carve out a life on my own terms. But Denise had always seen it as something she could take for her own daughter. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my voice smooth. Denise's silence stretched. What she didn't know was that 6 months ago, I had met with my mother's former attorney, Mr. Whitmore. He had noticed suspicious inquiries Denise had made about the trust fund and helped me reinforce legal protections. "Any unauthorized access?" "Not just blocked, prosecutable." "You've always been such a disappointment," Denise sneered. "Your stepsister deserves this more than you ever did." I hung up, my fingers still gripping the phone tightly. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Everything was documented. Every request. Every lie. Denise had finally overplayed her hand, and I was ready. Growing up with her had been like living in a battlefield. When my father remarried just 2 years after my mom's death, he seemed desperate to put the past behind him. Denise arrived with Olivia, who was 16 at the time, and from the beginning, I was pushed aside. My mother's legacy, her business, her love, her trust, was treated like an unfair privilege I didn't deserve. "Your mother wouldn't want you to be selfish," Denise would say, masking manipulation with feigned kindness. We're all family now. But we weren't. Not in any real sense. My father buried himself in work, leaving Denise to run the house as she saw fit. Olivia was praised for every little thing she did, while my accomplishments barely registered. When I graduated at the top of my class, securing a competitive position in real estate, my father couldn't make it to my ceremony. Something came up, Denise had told me. Later, I saw the photos of Olivia's extravagant birthday party plastered all over social media, an event my father had attended instead. That was my breaking point. I stopped looking for their approval and built my life on my own terms. I moved across the country, chased success, and distanced myself from the manipulation. But Denise? She never stopped scheming. Now, she thought she had won. She thought she had taken the last piece of my mother's protection away from me. She had no idea. I scrolled through my contacts and dialed Mr. Whitmore. "It's time," I said simply. By the time I landed back in New York that weekend, the legal wheels were already in motion. Denise had unknowingly committed fraud, and the bank had frozen the account. Olivia's wedding plans unraveled. The dream home she had picked out? Gone. Denise, who had spent years perfecting the art of deceit, was now caught in her own trap. And my father, at long last, was forced to see the truth. It wasn't just about the money. I had already won long before the legal victory. My independence, my success, my refusal to be manipulated, that was my real inheritance. And no one could take that away from me. Rachel had a minor cold. "She needs her father right now," Denise insisted. That was the moment I realized nothing would ever change unless I changed it myself. The very next day, I moved out. I focused on building my career, distancing myself from the suffocating dynamics of my father's household. The trust fund stayed untouched, not because I didn't need it, but because I knew that accessing it would mean dealing with Denise's interference. Every time I visited home, she found ways to remind me of my privilege, throwing pointed remarks about how hard Rachel had it compared to me. It was always the same passive-aggressive game. Then, 6 months ago, Mr. Whitmore, my mother's old attorney, called. "Vanessa, I thought you should know, Denise has been inquiring about the trust fund again." Everything clicked into place. She had been playing the long game, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. But I wasn't that vulnerable, grieving teenager anymore. I was my mother's daughter, and I had learned from the best how to protect what was mine. This wasn't just about money. It was about everything my mother had worked for, everything she had left to ensure I had the freedom to build something of my own. Sitting in my hotel room that evening, I pulled out the small photo I always carried of her. She was smiling, poised, confident, the kind of woman I had spent my life aspiring to be. I dialed Mr. Whitmore's number, my fingers steady despite the rage still simmering beneath my skin. He answered on the second ring. "Denise finally made her move," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "She claims she transferred everything to Rachel." "I was expecting this," he replied smoothly. "I got an alert about attempted access to the account this morning. But don't worry, Vanessa. The additional security measures we put in place worked exactly as planned. Every attempt was logged and documented." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So, nothing's actually been transferred? Not a single penny." Relief flooded through me. But it was more than that. It was validation. "We've got her dead to rights on attempted fraud," Mr. Whitmore continued. "The documentation is bulletproof. Would you like me to proceed with the next steps?" I thought about everything, the years of manipulation, the way Denise had slowly poisoned my relationship with my father, the endless attempts to control me. She had been so sure, so confident that I wouldn't see this coming, that I wouldn't be prepared. She had underestimated me. "Yes," I said firmly. "It's time to end this. Send the evidence to the family lawyer and copy my dad on everything. I want him to see exactly what his wife tried to do." "Consider it done," Mr. Whitmore assured me. Then, after a pause, he added, "Vanessa, your mother would be proud. She always said you were smarter than anyone gave you credit for." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." After hanging up, I grabbed my laptop and booked an earlier flight home. My client meeting could wait. I had a family matter to settle. Homecoming. I landed in Boston the next morning, stepping out into the crisp autumn air. The house I had grown up in looked exactly the same. But something was different. Maybe it was me. I had called ahead to let my father know I was coming, but I hadn't mentioned Denise's phone call. Some conversations needed to happen face to face. I found them all in the living room: Dad, Denise, and Rachel. Denise's smug smile faltered when she saw me. Her confusion deepened when I didn't look rattled or defeated. "Vanessa." My father stood, looking concerned. "I didn't expect you until later. Is everything okay?" "Actually, Dad, we need to talk." I pulled out my phone, opening the file Mr. Whitmore had sent me the night before. "Denise called me yesterday. She told me she emptied my trust fund and gave everything to Rachel." My father frowned, looking between us. "What?" "I thought you should see exactly what happened." I handed him the documents. Denise's face turned pale. "I was just trying to help Rachel." "Don't." My voice was steel. "Every attempt you made to access the account was documented. Every forged signature. Every unauthorized request. Every manipulation. It's all here." Dad's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. His expression darkened with each passing second. "Denise," he murmured, his voice thick with something unreadable. "Tell me this isn't true." Denise's mouth opened, then closed. Rachel, looking stunned, shook her head. "Mom? You lied." I crossed my arms. This wasn't about Rachel. This was about control. "You've spent years trying to undermine me, and you thought I wouldn't see it coming." Denise turned to my father, desperation creeping into her voice. "I was only looking out for Rachel. Vanessa doesn't need the money. She's already successful. That money wasn't yours to take." My father's voice was sharp, angry. "It was Vanessa's. It was her mother's." Silence stretched through the room. Denise's perfect little house of lies had finally collapsed. I picked up my coat, ready to leave. Dad, I said, my voice softer now. I don't expect you to fix this overnight. But you need to decide who you're really standing by, because I won't let this happen again. For the first time in years, I saw something shift in his eyes. Understanding. Regret. Vanessa, I need time. Take all the time you need. Just know, I'm done being the one who waits. And with that, I walked out, knowing I had finally won. Not just the battle over my trust fund, but the war for my freedom. What did you do? My father's voice was barely a whisper. She's lying. Rachel jumped in, her face red with anger. She's always been jealous of me. I didn't even blink. Instead, I pulled out another document, the complete trust fund statement. The money's still there, I said, my voice calm. Safe and untouched. Denise's attempts to transfer it failed because I was warned about her plans months ago. I took precautions. Denise's face twisted in rage. Precautions, she spat. You set me up. No, I corrected her, my voice steady. I protected what was mine, just like my mother taught me to do. The silence in the room was suffocating as my father read through each document. Every manipulative email Denise had sent to the bank. Every forged signature attempt. Every calculated move she had made to steal my inheritance. It was all there, in black and white. I did this for our family. Denise protested, but her voice wavered. Rachel needed. Stop. My father's voice cracked. Just stop, Denise. He exhaled sharply, his hands trembling over the stack of papers. These documents, you tried to forge my signature. You lied to the bank. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain I hadn't seen since my mother died. Vanessa, I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I said softly. Denise made sure of that. Mr. Whitmore had arranged everything chronologically, showing years of Denise's attempts to manipulate my relationship with my father, all while trying to get her hands on my trust fund. The latest documents showed her failed attempt to transfer the money, followed by her increasingly desperate calls to the bank. This is ridiculous. Rachel jumped to her feet, her face red with frustration. Mom was just trying to make things fair. Vanessa has always had everything handed to her. I turned to my stepsister, feeling a strange mix of pity and frustration. Handed to me? I repeated, shaking my head. I worked my way through college. Built my career from scratch. I never touched that trust fund. Mom left it to me because she wanted me to have options, just like she did. But Denise couldn't stand that, could she? Denise's composure finally cracked. You ungrateful little. I've already filed charges, I cut her off coldly. The bank has all the evidence of attempted fraud. Mr. Whitmore is handling everything. I turned to my father. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you needed to know the truth. The weight of 12 years of manipulation hung in the air. My father looked at Denise as if he were seeing her for the first time. And not in a good way. The next few moments changed everything. My father stood up, his hands trembling as he held the documents. Denise, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I want you out of this house. Tonight. Denise's face turned ghostly pale. What? Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this family. Done for this family? My father let out a hollow laugh, his voice full of quiet fury. You tried to steal from my daughter. You forged my signature. You've been lying to me for years. Rachel started crying. But for the first time, her tears weren't the usual manipulative ones. She looked genuinely shocked, perhaps realizing, finally, the weight of what her mother had done. The police will want to talk to you, I told Denise. Mr. Whitmore has already filed the reports. The bank's fraud department is involved now. Denise's face twisted into something venomous. You planned this, she hissed. You knew I would try to access the trust fund. I gave her a hard, even stare. No, Denise. You planned this. I just made sure I was ready when you did. Then I turned back to my father. There's more, I said carefully. Mr. Whitmore found evidence that she's been skimming money from your account too. Small amounts, but they add up. Over the years, it's been thousands. My father's face fell. He sank back into his chair, looking devastated. I felt a pang of guilt for causing him this pain, but he needed to know the truth. Get out, he repeated to Denise, his voice heavy with finality. Both of you. Rachel let out a broken sob. Dad, please. No, he interrupted, shaking his head. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. Denise and Rachel packed their things in a flurry of tears and accusations. But I barely listened. I stood quietly by the window, the same window I had watched my mother drive away from so many times, coming home from work. I could almost hear her voice. Always be prepared, sweetheart. And never let anyone take what's rightfully yours. Aftermath. In the weeks that followed, my father and I had some long overdue conversations. One evening, we sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my mother used to make us breakfast. I should have seen it sooner, my father murmured, running a hand over his face. I let Denise control too much. I let her twist things. I let her turn me against you. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I just wanted you to see me, Dad. Not through her version of me, but for who I really am. He looked up, his eyes glassy. I see you now. And for the first time in years, I believed him. That evening, we sat in the same kitchen where my mom used to help me with my homework. For the first time in years, my father and I truly talked. I failed you, he said, staring into his coffee cup. After your mom died, I was so focused on not being alone that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. I sighed, running my fingers along the rim of my mug. We both made mistakes, I admitted. I could have told you sooner about Denise's behavior. But I wanted proof first. I needed you to see it for yourself. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Denise faced charges of attempted fraud and financial exploitation. She tried to paint herself as a victim, claiming she was only trying to equalize things between Rachel and me. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bank's documentation showed years of calculated attempts to access my trust fund. Rachel reached out to me via email. She claimed she hadn't known about her mother's plans. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I understood that she was struggling with her own revelations about Denise's true nature. I'm sorry, she wrote. I always thought you had everything handed to you. Mom made it seem like you were the privileged one. But now I see, she was just jealous of what your mom built for you. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Some wounds took time to heal, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to rebuild a relationship with Rachel. Meanwhile, Mr. Whitmore helped me set up my own business consulting firm, something I'd always dreamed of but had been too cautious to pursue. The trust fund my mom left me became the seed money for my new venture, just as she'd intended. Your mother would be proud, Mr. Whitmore told me one afternoon during a meeting. She always said you had her business sense and your father's heart. She knew you'd do great things when you were ready. Dad started coming by my office for lunch every week. Sometimes we talked about Mom, sharing memories that Denise had made uncomfortable to discuss for years. Other times, we talked about the future. He was finally starting to look like himself again. The dad I remembered from before Mom got sick. One day, he smiled as he stirred his coffee. You know what your mom used to say about you? He asked. She said you were like a diamond. Pressure just made you stronger. I blinked back tears. She really said that? He nodded. All the time. Life took on a new rhythm. My consulting firm grew quickly, attracting clients who appreciated my direct approach and industry knowledge. I hired a small team, including Sarah, a brilliant analyst who reminded me of my mom. Same drive, same determination to prove herself. As for Denise, her trial ended in a plea deal. She avoided jail time but had to pay significant restitution. She was also banned from working in any financial capacity. The last I heard, she had moved to Arizona to live with her sister. Rachel stayed in Boston, working as a teacher's assistant. We kept minimal contact, an occasional email here and there, but nothing deep. Dad, on the other hand, threw himself into rebuilding our relationship. He started sharing stories about my mom that he had kept buried for years, how they met at a business conference, their early struggles to start her company, the late nights planning their future. Each story helped heal a little piece of what we'd lost. One evening, as we sorted through old photos in the attic, we found Mom's old business journal. Tucked inside was a letter, addressed to me, dated just weeks before she passed. My dearest Vanessa, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the freedom to choose your path. Don't let anyone dim your light or tell you what you deserve. You're stronger than you know, smarter than they give you credit for, and capable of anything you set your mind to. Trust yourself. I do. Love, Mom. I read the letter over and over again, feeling my mother's presence with every word. Those words became my mantra as I built my business. I framed the letter and hung it in my office, a daily reminder of where I came from and where I was going. A few months later, Dad officially retired from his job. He started volunteering at a local small business development center, helping young entrepreneurs, just like Mom used to do. One afternoon, as we sat on my office balcony overlooking the city, he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know, your mother always said you'd be the one to carry on her legacy. I smiled, looking at the framed letter inside. I think I finally understand what she meant. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And no one could take that away from me again. My father started volunteering at a grief counseling center, helping other families navigate loss without losing themselves. Sometimes he consulted for my firm, bringing years of experience and a perspective that complemented my approach perfectly. Looking back on those events 5 years later, I'm amazed at how much has changed. My consulting firm has expanded to 3 cities, helping biotech and pharmaceutical startups streamline their operations, just like my mother used to do. The trust fund she left me didn't just secure my future, it became the foundation for helping others build theirs. Dad fully retired last year, but he still drops by the office now and then, mentoring younger employees. It keeps me connected to your mom's legacy, he says. We have lunch together every Wednesday, making up for all those years we lost to Denise's manipulation. But the hardest lesson I learned wasn't about money or betrayal, it was about standing up for myself. Mom knew that one day I'd have to fight for what was mine. And she made sure I had the tools to do it. She taught me that true strength isn't about being tough, it's about being prepared and patient enough to wait for the right moment. Sometimes, I visit the old house where I grew up. Dad still lives there, but it's different now. The walls have been repainted, the furniture rearranged, and all traces of Denise's presence erased. In Mom's old office, which Dad turned into a library, I found her collection of business books last week. Inside one, she had written notes about teaching me to run the company someday. I never got that chance with her. But I'm building something of my own now. Every decision I make in my business carries echoes of her wisdom. The trust fund she left me wasn't just about money. It was about believing in myself enough to stand my ground when others tried to take what was mine. Denise's attempt to steal my inheritance taught me something valuable. Sometimes, people show you exactly who they are. And the best response? Be prepared. I'm grateful now for those difficult years. Because they shaped me into someone my mother would be proud of, someone who doesn't just survive challenges, but grows stronger from them. The family photo albums have been reorganized, keeping the memories that matter. On my desk at work sits my favorite picture, Mom and me at her office, both of us laughing about something long forgotten. It reminds me daily that while some people try to tear you down, others build you up in ways that last a lifetime. On the anniversary of my mother's passing, Dad and I visited her grave together. We brought fresh flowers from her favorite garden, a tradition we started that first year. Standing there, I shared with him the letter I had found in her journal. He read it silently, his hands trembling slightly as he held the worn paper. She was always thinking ahead, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Even when she was fighting for her own life, she was fighting for yours too. In that moment, I realized that every step I had taken to protect her legacy, every choice to stand firm, every decision to build something meaningful, was her final gift to me. She would be so proud of you, Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed him. And I couldn't be prouder to call you my daughter. Together, we stood in quiet reflection, knowing that while some wounds never fully heal, love and resilience have the power to transform even the deepest scars into strength.